Fabulous, everyone.
All right, thank you. This totally helps because I was telling Shane, and Shane doesn't believe me, that I was nervous, and I still get nervous. And one of the reasons was because I was expecting to talk to a whole room of friends and old-timers, and then this morning they asked, how many of you is your first GDevCon? And it was like half of the room, and I was like, ah! But I think we're gonna be okay. This is not gonna be a technical presentation. I feel like a grandma here because I'm going to be talking about basically my career the last 24 years and all the lessons that I've learned throughout. And I'm hoping that there's something for everyone. Okay, so our giants are female. For those of you who don't know, Steve Watts, Shane, and I started this. I think it was a first GDevCon. And I picked this time Mileva Maric, also known as Mileva Einstein or Mileva Maric Einstein. She's a Serbian physicist and mathematician. And there's a debate as how much she actually contributed to Einstein's work. And the thought that I want to leave in your minds about this is the fact that we can believe and have that debate. It's already a thing on its own, right? So that's the thought. If you want to talk more about it, we can talk at dinner time. Also, I can give you success stories about why we add that slide. Okay, the agenda. When I prepare the presentation, I prepare it for 45 minutes to an hour, and then I saw that I had 30 minutes, okay? So I'm gonna go fast, which is not novelty for the people that have already seen my presentations. When the recording happens, you know you can always slow me down. But what I'm gonna also do is from Mexico to Austin, since that is like my racing years, I'm just gonna skip those. I'm gonna show you the pictures, and I hope that there are enough pictures there that you're like, I wanna know more about that, so you ask me at dinner time. And then I'll talk about NI to Delacor, Delacor to acqui-hiring, and then after acqui-hiring, and then I'll summarize what I think the takeaways are. Okay, so let me tell you a story and the lessons learned along the way. And all the images are created by AI using Midjourney, which was also a joke I was trying to tell you guys. I did not spend too much time modifying the prompts. So it's like me writing my life story and giving it to the director and then going to see it in the movies, and it's like, what the hell what they were doing there? I'm gonna hope I don't get distracted by pointing out, look at the fingers and stuff like that. I hope I can keep myself on the story. But like Steve says, I like to help everyone, I like to please everyone, so I wanted to make sure that there was something for everyone. So if you don't care about what I'm saying, at least you have some eye candy there and try to spot all the errors that AI is doing on these images. All right, so the first point here is castles in the sky. This is a conversation I had with my dad. I don't know, I think I was 13 years old, something like that. And I told him, I got it. My father was like, okay. I'm like, it's not crazy to set goals and make castles in the sky. When it becomes crazy and when it becomes an issue is when you start so obsessed with the castle on the left and building the staircase to that castle that you don't see that you have one that already has the staircase built for you, which is the one here on the right, and it's lower and it's easier to achieve. And my father basically told me, you know, that's pretty profound, and carry that with you. So try to set your goals not so restrictive that you feel like a failure because you didn't get to that one, right? There's going to be other ways to achieve the same path. And these are the ones that I'm going to go fast through them, so I'm going to just let you watch them a little bit, and then you can ask me later, and I'll tell you what these images are about. And I'm going to share the slides so you can see all the prompts, okay? Okay, so the first takeaway is set goals, castles in the sky. Do not obsess so much with the castle chosen that you miss castles closer to you. And luck comes to those who prepare. During college in university in Mexico, I worked as an intern for Procter & Gamble. And around the beginning of '99, my boss walks in the room and says, De La Cueva, you're the only one that knows about computers here, because all my other interns were mechanical engineers. He's like, there's this small project called Y2K. And I was like, well, maybe it's small in the world of detergent, right? And control systems for detergent. And I want you to lead it. And it's going to be good for you. It's going to give you exposure and everything. So I guess, several months later, when he started seeing the news, he realized that Y2K was not a project for an intern. So he called the IT VP in Cincinnati and said, I am so sorry. I put an intern in charge of this. I am going to correct it immediately. And the guy was like, whatever you do not touch her. Latin America is the only region that is meeting all the deadlines in control systems. So we don't know what she's doing, but you leave her alone. So that was my introduction to the business world. I was an intern, and I was heard when I had suggestions and figure out my way somehow to use influence and not necessarily authority to get the message across. Then I graduated and I got a job offer to either stay at Procter & Gamble or go to National Instruments. One of those castles in the sky was for me to study engineering because I wanted to do something to improve the life of people with disabilities, and I wanted to work in the biosciences. And I was like, Procter & Gamble, at the end of the day, I'm going to be making detergent and shampoo and conditioner. And then I back then had a product called BioBench, which of course was discounted discontinued a year after I joined, but there was a chance that I could be working in that. So again, I looked at my castles. I had always said to the US, only if they paid me, and I paid me. So I took the chance and moved to Texas. And of course I love it, and I would not move back. One of the first things that I had at NI was the advantage or the surprise that the majority of the leadership positions in the application engineering department were women. It got to the point that there were so many of us that my boss at the time was like worried that he was going to be accused of reverse discrimination. And it just happened to be that there were more of us. I don't know why, but that year, of those 3 years, there were majority women. And then I moved to a different department where I was the only woman within NI. So it was like culture shock, right? One of the things that helped me when things got not so nice in the group that I was working at is this idea that you've heard me talk about in other presentations. How many of you have heard about the FU fund? Okay, a few. Well, let me introduce it to you. The F is an expletive, so I'm not going to say it because we're going to keep it PG-13. And the U, yeah, thank you, Steve. It's just you, right? So the idea of this fund is when Luis and I, my husband, and I got married, we decided to leave just with one salary. And we had friends that made fun of us because they're like, you're still living like a student. You're making, engineering salaries. Why are you living like students? And we always knew we wanted that FU fund. And what that FU fund is, when you're not happy at your job, when you're asked to do something that you're not so sure you want to do, you don't want to have the fear of them firing you. You don't want to be leaving every month that you could not go away with it, you cannot lose that job. Because the way you behave changes a lot. When you don't care about, the worst thing that they can do is fire you. They're not going to hit you. They're not going to kill you, right? The worst thing that they can do is fire you. That's going to give you a lot of freedom of speaking your mind. And I can speak my mind. So we had that FU fund. So then things didn't get so good. I got accepted at the University of Texas. And I told Luis, look, I've been working since I was in high school, right? Or even junior high school. I want to be a full-time student. I want to dedicate to do my master's, and I'm not going to work. That lasted about 6 months. And then people found out that I knew LabVIEW, and they started hiring me to do work, and that's how Delacor was born. So live below your means, and again, luck comes to those who prepare. Being at the University of Texas, I thought I was going to study to make medical devices, right? And then Luis, my husband, had always told me, you're not a hardware engineer, you're a software engineer. and I didn't believe him, but he was right. I am a software engineer. And having that time to just refocus and figuring out what I wanted to do next guided me to start my own business in Delacor. And you can see there that AI can get a little stereotypical. Those were the images I was getting. The first type of jobs that I did at Delacor, and Delacor was just me, Delac for De La Cueva, OR for Orozco, my husband's last name. I gave him 2 letters, right? Was to be a teacher, a code janitor, a firefighter, and a code archaeologist, right? Whenever I would come to save a project, I would find this is the area where they learned about local variables. This is the area where they learned about value signaling. And you can walk over here and you see that here's where they tried to figure out classes, right? And that was my job. The NI salespeople kept asking me, what's your area of specialty? They wanted to know, is it defense? Is it, I don't know, something else, test and measurement. And I would be like, my area of expertise is LabVIEW. And that was something that NI never understood. So the way I basically rephrase it is, whenever you need a firefighter, just call me. I'll figure out. If it's not LabVIEW related, if it's hardware related, I'll know who to call. And the immediate question was like, why do you want to be a firefighter? And my answer was, no matter what I do, I'm going to leave them better than I found them. As we grew, one of the things we created was DQMH. How many here do not know what DQMH is? Okay, I'll talk about it later. You can come and I'll tell you. This is better than asking. Okay, how many people don't use source code control? Okay, so one of the things we did with DQMH is we treated ourselves as one of your customers. This applies not only for you as small business owners, it also applies to you as a person. I have found that there are 4 things that keep us balanced and going. Eat well, sleep well, exercise, and have a purpose. And I have realized if you lose any of those any day, things start getting out of balance. So treating yourself as one of your own customers is taking care of those 4 things. If you're in a small team, or if you are in a consultant business, you should, or you could, treat your company as one of your customers. In our case, our customer was Delacor, and the product that we were doing for Delacor was DQMH. Because it made us faster, it helped us to be consistent, all the things that those of you who use it have found. And instead of investing money on marketing or advertising, we invested money on DQMH. So just think about that. What could you be doing for your internal team if you're in a large company that could be considered an internal project? Now, why is it important to say treat as a customer? Is that when we would evaluate every month how much time we were given to each customer, we would check if we were starving Delacor, right? So there was always this reminder, we haven't worked on Delacor in a long time, or we're working too much on Delacor projects, we need to back, right? It also worked as an incentive to some of my contractors because they really like working on DQMH. So I would be like, okay, once you finish this task, I'll give you a task on DQMH, right? And that was kind of like the carrot. So early on, I met this mentor. His name is Jason Cohen. The blog is called A Smart Bear. So if you're in the business of software, he's definitely someone to follow. He's more geared towards startups. But this is one of his most visited blog posts. And the rich versus king idea comes from venture capitalists trying to figure out when they want to invest in a company, if the CEO is in it to be rich, or if he or she is in it to be king. Why is this important? The way they're going to manage that CEO is going to be very different. The one that is in it to be rich is going to want to get the money and is going to be totally fine to be replaced by someone else. They got it. They released the company, right? If they're in it to be king, they like their name being at the top of the building, right? They have an identity attached to the company. So that's going to change how they react if they need to be replaced. And what Jason said is, you really can do both. The other thing that was very important to me was that graph. And the items on the graph, if you cannot see them, is here on the bottom, is what we talked about earlier. So the title is How Cash in the Bank Affects Your Lifestyle. It is not linear. So in the x-axis, you have cash in the bank. So first is you cannot lose your job, right? You're living paycheck to paycheck. Then is you own your house. And then there's the freedom line here. Never look at the right side of the menu again. And then you see the step from here to the private jet is a lot shorter than down here. And that line changes, right? I'm sure that when Jeff Bezos was starting Amazon, it was probably like that, right? And right now the private jet is landing on the moon. So, you figure out the chart for yourself. So we decided that we were in it to do both, to be rich and to be queen. And to be more specific, we figured out that Luis was in it to be rich, and I was in it to be queen. But the mixture helped, because I took so much pride on making all of you happy that we were very successful. But he also would make sense that I would not give everything for free. That's why he would always put on the forums, if you had a complaint about DQMH, that we could send you your money back. So know your why. Are you in it to be rich? Are you in it to be queen? Are you in it to be both? And this applies not only to business owners. It also applies as an employee. Are you a 9-to-5 employee? I'm out of there. I'll just do as I'm told, and this has nothing to do with my ambitions and me as a person? Or do you get a little bit more involved in your job? So, like I said at the beginning, we just basically said yes to everything. We would do any trick you would ask us to do. The difference was on the price. We figured out soon that saying no was not the right answer. What we would do is figure out the quote size, right? So we would not be cursing the customer's name while doing that project because we didn't want to do it. To our surprise, more than once they said yes. And that's when we started realizing, okay, for those we need to charge a little bit more, right? So that's how we started setting our things. All right, then what happened is we took a project from a company that we didn't know in an area that we didn't like, test and measurement. It's crazy being in the labby world, but our customers were not in the manufacturing business. And if they were startups, and their manufacturing tests were more characterization, maybe 10 units. No. This was an end-of-line test, hundreds of units. And we did it as a favor to a friend that was working in R&D at that time, and he called us and said, I know you don't do manufacturing tests, but I need you to do this as a favor. Just one. They pay really well, so we took it. That, I don't know if you want to say backfire or was a good decision. The growth went through the roof. And within 3 years, they were our largest customer, mainly because we were doing hardware for them. We were doing test equipment. And the other funny thing is, this had never happened to us. They didn't care about the IP. They told us, you own the IP for that test system, you give us a part number, we order it online. Which leads me to them realizing that a mom and pop shop in Texas owned the IP for their test systems, right? And was building all their test systems. And that's why we have a little hidden treasure there. They called us and said, either we start a new manufacturing test team, or you come and join us. And I was, hell no. I'm unmanageable. If any of you know me, you know that I cannot be working for anyone. I was ready to say no. And Luis was like, calm down, let the man talk, let's see what they have to offer. And next thing I know, I get an email, and it was signed by M&A. I didn't know what M&A was. Luis was like, Google it. And it stands for mergers and acquisitions. So that's when it hit me. It was not, we want to hire you. It was, we want to buy you out. So here's one of the questions that I got on the Discord channel was like, how do you evaluate your business? How do you give it a value to your business? And thankfully, we talked to my mentor again, the guy that wrote that Rich and King thing. And he said, Fab, whatever you do not start putting a number to your customers or to your IP. The question was not how much is your company value. The question was how much for you to close down your business and come work for us, to give up on your identity, on your goals, on your community, right? You are known as the DQMH person. And I didn't know at the time that was going to involve also, I was not allowed to be, publishing stuff. I was not allowed to be presenting stuff. That was a big ask for me. Because if you know me, what motivates me is solving problems, teaching, sharing, right? And learning. I love learning. Everything. So, thankfully, we had thought about that. Luis and I had asked years before, what would it take for us to just be somebody's employee? I was looking for a word that would be acceptable. And we had what the red lines were. So when the negotiation started, I was able to say, I have 2 red lines. First one, DQMH. I don't want you to buy DQMH. I made a promise to the Labio community that if they were using DQMH and I won the lottery, because I don't want to be run over by a boss, I was going to make sure that I didn't leave you hanging. So that was my first red line. And the second red line is I don't want to move. So the two, the discussion or the negotiation came down to, if you need us to move, we just want to make sure that we're making enough that we can come back to this house, because this is the house where we want to retire. And for DQMH, I suggested to create a foundation. So originally, DQMH Consortium was going to be a foundation. In the US, getting a not-for-profit going takes months, and they needed me to do this in 3 months. So I said, okay, let's do a consortium. There's a definition of consortium. I had to use it because the images that I was getting before explained to me why some people have questions about why we call ourselves the DQMH Consortiums. But if you read that, I think it's a good definition for us. I was allowed to be the president of the DQMH Consortium, but my contract said that I couldn't work more than 2 hours on DQMH Consortium a week, more than 2 hours a week. So the nice thing about this was seeing that not only I did a great job choosing who are the members of the consortium, but that the baby that I had created, DQMH, was really ready to live on its own. Because the consortium has not just maintained it, right? The product has thrived, and there's even now an ecosystem around it. But knowing your red lines, knowing what is that you're willing to say no to, or that you would not take a big opportunity, it's important. Because you never know when that opportunity is going to come. We didn't know. It was like, I loved my life at the time. I was taking a lot more time to do pottery. I was slowing down. I had written this book, right? I was preparing my tour, then COVID happened. So you never know. So after a period of due diligence, we joined a mega-corporation. Again, that's the definition of mega-corporation, so I had to switch it to large corporation. And that's when I realized that there's a saying in Spanish that it's better to be the head of a mouse than the tail of a lion. Because when you're the tail of a lion, you only see shit coming, and it's coming your way. The first year was very hard for me. And the hardest thing was I felt like a thief. They had given me all this money, a huge amount of money, and they were not taking advantage of me. Like I was nowhere doing the stuff that I could do. And another mentor told me, Fab, don't think about it that way. The money they gave you was for closing your business. That is a transaction that's over. What you're getting for doing the job that you're doing now is your salary. And if you look at it in that regard, you're meeting and exceeding expectations. And that was important for my health and my well-being. That changed my perspective. And this is where this comes. We have this habit in my household to have a meeting with ourselves. And this is where you schedule a meeting with yourself from a year from now, and you say, here's where I'm at now, these are the things that I like, these are the things that I would like to improve. And this is where I see myself in 1 year. And you have to do it because time flies, and you may not realize that. And it's not a performance review, it's just check in. Am I doing right? So do a meeting with yourself. Another change that happened was that when I was a consultant, customers would just shut up and write notes, right? It pained them to pay the check for my services. When I became an employee, then you're just moving the same lever, right? And unfortunately for some companies, you are seen as a free resource. So this goes for small companies, larger companies, is know how much, what's the fully burdened rate for your employees. That has to account for how much it costs to keep the lights on, buying the computers, paying for the rent, right? It's not just what you're charging your customer for an hour for one of your employees. And if you're having trouble convincing your bosses, for those of you who work in companies, of hiring a consultant or a contractor because they would be faster, it's a good thing to know this number because you can show them how much it really costs to have you do it versus having an expert do it. So that's the other lesson, fully burdened rate. Know your cost versus your value. And again, luck comes to those who prepare. Another thing that happened in this acqui-hiring is the acqui part of the thing, the acquisition, was negotiated with one department. The hiring was negotiated with another department. We were put at the bottom of the organization. And I told you the story about Procter & Gamble because I wanted you to know I've always been in positions where it doesn't matter where I'm in the org chart. And all of a sudden, I was in a place where one day I was in a meeting and my boss didn't make it. And the lady that was there, that was in another leadership position, said, the person I want to talk to is not here. So let's cancel the meeting. And I was like, you want to brainstorm and then you can present to my boss and have a better situation? Me knowing that I knew more than my boss about the subject, right? And she said no. Because I was at the bottom of the org chart. So, value human interactions, every human interactions, not just with management. Because you never know what you're going to learn from another human being. And at the end of the day, we all poop, okay? We're all going to die, and we're all going to end up in the same place. So, there's no, this person has more to give me than the next. Okay. I have 2 minutes. Another thing, and you probably have heard me about this, I would get antsy when somebody would tell me, I don't like my job. And I would be like, move, you're not a tree. But now I was in a situation where I didn't like my job, and I couldn't move. So all of a sudden, I understood this. And so remember that, and that's the carrot to get the horse going. And that's the story of the frog in hot water. Don't get too comfortable. Make that appointment with yourself, the every year appointment, not only every year, but also there may be other triggers. If the reason you're not moving is because you don't want to uproot your high school kid, right? You want him to finish school, great. Make an appointment for yourself for the senior year of your kid. Otherwise, when you turn around, you realize that he already graduated with a PhD, and you're still in the same place where you didn't like to be. So, have checkpoints, not just that meeting with yourself every year, but meeting with yourself for these milestones. And remember, you can encourage, but you cannot control. This is something that I've learned on ceramics. Like, I love doing stuff with ceramics, but oh my gosh, there's so many variables. So all I can think of is you can encourage, but you cannot control. So that led me on my job to realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to change everything. I'm going to have to reduce my circle of influence. And I started doing Labio user groups with a team in Taiwan who really care about my knowledge. I put all the documentation that I had from Delacor in their internal system. This helped a lot, by the way. And when we resigned, my boss said, I went to check on the documentation, and it's so good, Fab, that I may not understand what the hell you're doing, but I can see that if I follow the steps, I would get there. However, and I quote, this is a firefighter company. Nobody has time to stop and read. This came in my favor because I was like, they asked, could you come back as a consultant? And I was like, oh, great, but you made me sign a non-compete that I couldn't create and reopen my business. So if you give me a waiver and I can reopen Delacor, yes, I could come as a consultant. So the Delacor is back. But it's something different. We're no longer saying yes to everything. We're being a lot more picky about the projects we're working on. I am focusing on the things that make me happy. So one of them is I'm going to improve the DQMH training. So I'm looking for guinea pigs. It's going to be free. You're going to pay with your sweat, tears, feedback, and homework. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to be selecting a small group. I'm also focusing on finding a way for engineers and artists to collaborate. It was funny how things happen, and we talked about an artist project earlier today that used automation. I also realize now that I need all those letters: science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And if you don't have art in your lives, guys, I can tell you that being an artist has made me a better engineer, and being an engineer has made me a better artist. I also picked a very technical area of art, which is ceramics. So all that to say, what we got was freedom. We didn't get the new car, we didn't get the new house, we didn't get the new airplane. I still drive my year 2000 Honda CR-V, and Luis still drives his 2003 Accord. This is where York says, yes, but your other wheels. So Luis and I built that airplane. It took us 12 years to build it. We built it before we joined the company that I've been talking about. And I'm not showing this to show off. I just want to show you that we were already on track. I would be giving this presentation, but it would be 10 years from now, right? I was able to accelerate the date to be financially independent by joining this company. And even though during the 3 years, it felt like it was an eternity, it was not that much. Would I do it again? Yes, but this time, I would realize that there's 2 contracts. We focused so much on the acquisition side that we didn't pay enough attention to the hiring side. There was not a very clear job definition. A lot of things that had to do with the everyday life were just talked about, were not in writing. So if you ever are in this situation, come talk to me. I can give you the advice that I didn't have, and hopefully we can get you in a better situation. And the last thing is know what motivates you. And if you have a team, you're a team leader or team manager or an employer, know what motivates your team. It's not always money. What motivates me is solving interesting problems, is learning, is teaching, is sharing. And my bosses were still trying to motivate me with salary increases and bonuses, right? So know what motivates you. And here's a summary of all the takeaways. And if it wasn't clear, I mentioned several mentors. So have mentors, have friends. Steve, York, Ryan Powell, we had that group going with DSH workshops, and they were life-saving for me because I could go vent with them. Also, as DSH workshops, we are offering another service now, which is consulting more on the business side, right? Where we can talk about different layers of your business, not necessarily the technical side. I was hoping that the fact that my company had been acquired was going to be a big sell factor, but apparently people are wary of coaches, of business coaches. I promise you, I'm not going to be giving you weird goals. It's all going to be based on experience. And also, disclaimer, there's a book called I Was a Great Mother Until I Had Kids. And one of the things that it says is that worse than an adult that doesn't have kids giving advice to other adults that have kids is the adult that has 1 kid. because they assume that everything that worked with that kid is going to work with everybody. And until you have to, you realize that it's not true. So, disclaimer, I've only sold one business. So I only have that experience. All right, that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you for not bringing me down off the stage, Georg. Are there any questions? No questions? Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.